You guys want a lesson on bracelets? You want me to teach you about bracelets? YouTube video? This ain't gonna be no YouTube video. We'll talk about relic bracelets only for now, and then we will go from there. So, bracelets. What are bracelets? Bracelets are this slot right here that's been locked between your ability stone and your bottom accessory for a while. The bracelet accessory drops from all content that is 1490 or higher. So the moment that you get the Braille update in December, bracelets will be obtainable from Chaos Dungeon, from Guardian raids, and from Legion raids 1490 and higher. So what is the bracelet for? Bracelets are a stat pad. Besides for the fact that they just give you stats, some of them have special effects, and they're defensive effects, they're offensive effects, and they're miscellaneous effects as well. The bracelet itself is pretty interesting. When I hover over this bracelet on the left, you can see that there are two effects. There's the thing with a lot of text, the 7%, the 1000, and the 2%. You can see that's all part of one effect in that locked padlock icon. And then right below that is another effect, which is plus 65. That's the domination stat, and that's another padlock icon. Right below that is a little swirly icon, and then some grayed out text. If I go to some of these other ones, you'll see that this one has one padlock effect, which is crit plus 65, and then two grayed out swirly thingies. So the swirly thingies are identifiable lines. It's like if you were bringing an item to Deckard Cain and you were like, hey, old man, can you identify this for me? Then he identifies it for you. The padlock stats are, as you would imagine, they're locked. You cannot change them no matter what. They are permanently fixated on the item, and no matter what you do, they'll always be part of that item. Okay? So these bracelets that you see on the marketplace, they have not been identified yet. Once you identify an item, it could no longer be listed on the auction house. And so bracelets that are on the auction house are evaluated by their padlocked stats. If it has one or two padlock stats, what the stats are, and then if it has one or two identifiable lines. If it's a one statter with a crap stat, with one unidentified lines, it's useless. But if it has two padlock stats that are good and two identifiable lines, then that thing can be worth literally hundreds of thousands of gold, depending on how good it is. I shit you not. I'll even show you an example. This one has plus 100 crit, plus 95 specialization, and two identifiable lines. It's highly evaluated because the two padlock stats are two highly desirable combat stats that people definitely want. And it's a maximum roll on the first one. It goes up to 100. As a disclaimer, you guys see I have a bracelet on the right, and it's an ancient tier. Relic bracelets can later on be upgraded into ancient tier. So if you have a really good relic bracelet, you can still upgrade it into ancient, and you'll be able to keep your existing lines, and it'll add an additional line and increase all your existing stats upwards by either one effect or by 20%, depending on what kind of stat it is. Okay, so we kind of delved into that a little bit, so let's talk about the kind of stats that a bracelet can actually get. Flashbang. This is the exclamation point guide command. This is a very long document that I wrote a long time ago that details most of the mechanics in the game, and there's a section just for bracelets. First of all, these are default effects. This is Vitality, which is HP, and your main stat. Main stat increases your damage, but it usually increases your damage by a very small amount because it is a static amount of main stat, not a percentage amount like your costumes. So as you get more main stat from upgrading your armors and whatnot, the value of this stat actually goes down and down and down and down, and it gives less and less global percentage damage increase. Vitality just gives you a lot of HP. A good Vitality line can give you as much as an additional 10,000 max HP. Main stat is things like Dexterity, Intelligence, Strength, stuff like that. Combat stats are the ones that you already know. Crit specialization, subdue, swiftness, endurance, and proficiency. A bracelet can have up to 2 combat stats, meaning you can get crit specialization, you can get specialization swiftness, but you cannot have crit specialization and swiftness. You can only get up to 2 tops. Then these are where it gets kind of weird. These are the miscellaneous lines. These are special effects, and these do very different things. Here's an example of a really unique one. This one is called Reverse. If you're attacked by an enemy when you're under 10, 15, or 20% of your max HP, you get a buff that after 10 seconds flips your HP. Yes, it is literally the curse from Kakul Saintone in a bracelet effect. There's a lot of different effects in here. Most of them are pretty garbage, and you're going to see in parentheses 41 to 100 and 61 to 120 for the crit line. You can ignore the purple one. This is for ancient. These are the stat ranges, meaning when you roll that stat, it can roll anywhere between this amount. For these special effects, it can't roll between. It can roll between 3 levels. So max HP, you could either roll 5500, which is a low roll, 7300, which is a mid roll, or 9100, which is a maximum roll. When you get a bracelet, the padlocked stat, it could be any one of these up until here. This is where it stops. So any of these could be the padlocked stat. Once you get to here, all of these effects can only be identified through the unidentified lines. These effects can never be the padlocked stats, and these are the best effects that you can get on bracelets. These are the ones that can increase your damage by upwards of 4% in a single line. So how can we quantify a bracelet? What makes a good bracelet, and how do you decide what kind of bracelet you want? Bracelets are basically quantified by how many offensive lines you have and how good those lines are. For example, for many classes, a high roll of crit or specialization will increase your global damage output by around like 3%. Sometimes it goes up to 4%, sometimes as low as 2%. It depends on the class. Certain classes get more benefit out of the combat stat than others. For example, Sorceress gets less benefit than other classes. A 100 roll of specialization for Sorceress gives less global damage output than what 100 specialization might do for another class. So this varies depending on the class. Still, in almost every situation, every class will want 2 combat stats for an ideal bracelet. So for Sorceress, that's Igniter, you would want crit spec. If you're Death Blow, you would want crit spec. If you're like a Taijutsu Scrapper, you would want crit swiftness. And then the amount you would want will just depend on what your budget is. If you want like a 100, then you'll have to expect to pay top gold. You'll be paying hundreds of thousands. But if you settle for something, say like 100 crit and like 50 of the other stat, you might be able to get it for a fraction of the price. People will evaluate these things very differently from one another. Fions? Relic bracelets cost 15 fions per purchase. Now, this is where you can kind of finagle it around a bit if you want to get things cheaper or more expensive, right? Remember what I said before about how a crit or a spec line will get you between like 2 and 4% global damage? Let's say instead you go for a main stat crit bracelet or a main stat specialization bracelet. That's going to be way cheaper because the main stat on average will increase your damage between 1% and 2% at your current level of gearing, which is a lot less than what a combat trait can give you. And combat traits also have other auxiliary effects such as identity gauge gain, which aren't included in, the global damage calculations. So you can get a cheaper bracelet by opting for something like the main stat in the padlocked stats. Whereas if you do 2 combat stats in the padlocked stats, you're guaranteeing your bracelet has those effects right from the very beginning. And then you're trying to get in the unidentified lines the good special effects. Okay? In most cases, you're going to go for your 2 main stats, but some people will go for main stat and then 1 combat stat. Then if you're support, you have 2 options. Supports can do swiftness specialization, or you can do swiftness endurance or swiftness expertise. Those are all fine options as a support if you want to go super budget, since those are all technically usable stats for you, but they might lower your efficacy a little bit. No one's going to really complain if you do that. Let's look at some of the special effects as well, just so you can get an idea of what they do. Most of these are pretty straightforward. For example, increases back attack damage by 2.5, 3, or 3.5% damage, or head attack damage, or increases your critical hit chance by 2, 3, or 4%, or your crit damage by 4, 6, or 8%, or just straight up a damage increase of 1.5, 2, or 2.5%. This is what I was talking about before, where a bracelet line will usually increase your damage by a few percent per line. What would a god bracelet look like? When you get a relic bracelet, a god bracelet would look like, this is just an example, a crit spec with high rolls, and then something like superiority with 2.5%, which is 2.5% extra damage. And then maybe on top of that, we could throw in a spike effect which will give you up to 3.6% damage for some seconds, or even the cycle effect, which is arguably considered the best line in the game on a bracelet. This is widely considered to be the best on most classes. When it's referring to monster, is it like bosses, normal mobs? All enemies. All enemies that are level 60 or below, which is all current enemies in the game until they later on raise the level cap. So, rolling a bracelet. This is the part that really sucks the most. And I will demonstrate. I'll demonstrate with an ancient bracelet. This is probably the worst part of it all. Oh god, that's really expensive. Fuck it. I don't want to roll it. Okay, so like you get bracelets from all contents. When you break down bracelets, you get dust, just like ability stones, which you can turn in for a bracelet. This on the right will show you the list of potential effects. This is what I have translated for you guys on the document, the exclamation point guide document. So this is no different. You can see the initial silver amount. This is the cost for just a... Actually, why don't I do this with a relic bracelet so you have a better idea. This one's not that bad. It's like a good settle one. This is 65 swiftness and 3,500 of intelligence. So this is pretty good for a demo. This is the kind of bracelet you would want if you just wanted a bracelet that was like decent, that you wanted to just settle on without like breaking your back for it. 18,000 silver is the first cost to identify it. Remember, the moment we identify it, it can no longer be listed on the auction. This says there are 4 rolls remaining. So the first one is spent to identify it. This is a warning that binds the item to you once you identify it. So it's been identified. We got 2 fairly useless things. We got a stat that we don't care about, and we got health, which we also don't care about because health doesn't increase your damage. There are 3 rolls remaining. The silver cost also went up from 18,000 to 20,000. There's a padlock icon. This allows you to lock the stat in place for the next roll if you want to. You can lock as many as you want, and it doesn't cost anything to lock it. So if you do get a good line, you can lock it in place. It does not cost anything. But I don't like any of these, so we're gonna roll again. These are still both useless. I'm personally convinced that it is weighted against those special effects. And so we roll again, and now the silver cost went up again, and there are 2 rolls remaining. And it's 2 useless stats again. It's still 2 things that I don't like, a stat that's not useful to me, and also, once again, health. And now the silver cost goes up again, and it's 72,000 silver now, and this is the last roll. Let me demonstrate what it looks like when you padlock a stat. You padlock a stat, it keeps that stat, and then the other one gets rolled, and then this is also quite useless. And so that bracelet is what I would call a dead bracelet, and I would dismantle it, or you would dismantle it, but in my case, I would yeet it. And that's it. Once it's had its rolls done, the item is like that forever, and it can never change ever again. That means you could spend 300,000 gold on a 100 crit, 100 spec bracelet, do your 4 rolls, end up with fucking vitality, expertise, and then it's dead, and you spent 300,000 gold for nothing. So nobody, absolutely nobody, goes for a perfect bracelet. You want to know something? I'm going to use Zeals as an example because he's already disclosed the amount. His War Dancer's bracelet increases his War Dancer's damage by 10.4%. He spent 2 million gold to get that bracelet. My Scouter, I spent 50,000 gold on his bracelet. His bracelet gives him 11% damage because he was lucky. My Scouter was very lucky. All of my other characters, their bracelets are around 9%, like 8%, 9% damage increase. Most Giga Whales in Korea settle at around the 10 to 11% margin, and only the very, very lucky fuckers have bracelets that are like 15%. The theoretical max for an ancient bracelet is around 18 to 20% damage increase just from your bracelet. I have not seen a single bracelet that has had that. Not a single one. From all the whales that I have looked at, I have not seen a single one. The 15% bracelets are like 4 out of 5 lines are offensive lines. But like an 18 to 20% would need 5 offensive lines, all special effects. I haven't seen any. The highest that I've seen is like 16%. And that person had vitality on one of their lines. After you upgrade from Relic to Ancient, how many rolls do you have for the extra line? Good question. The extra line that you get, you're allowed to roll that one particular Ancient line 3 times, in addition to the identification, separate from everything else. Is the Theon cost different from Relic to Ancient? Yes, Ancients are 20. You get the same special effects on 2 different lines? No, you cannot. Didn't Steve get a God Bracelet for SS when he was prepping for a con? No. He got a Settle Bracelet. Stoops' bracelet increases his global damage output by 8.8%. However, one of the lines is increasing his damage by about 1.7%, but it cannot overlap with a support who has the same line. So if a support already has that line for some reason, then that nullifies that line for him. So it would be like a 6% bracelet in that case. Most of you guys are going to settle between 6 and 8%, and that's fine. That's perfectly serviceable. How would you go about buying a 6 to 8% bracelet? If I wanted to be more budget about it, I would get the primary stat that I'm looking for. So as a Sork, I would go for specialization, and then maybe go intelligence if I wanted to be more budget, because crit spec bracelets are crazy expensive, but intelligence specialization ones are cheaper because the intelligence lines kind of suck. Whereas the crit line would give me like 2.5 to 3% additional damage. The intelligence line for me only gives me about like 0.7%. And so the intelligence line is actually a fucking awful line, but at least the actual purchasing in the bracelet is a lot cheaper. And then I would just roll the bracelet lines and just hope for the best. Honestly, get lines that are halfway decent for your build. Well, the problem is sometimes you can get lines that are completely irrelevant to your build. For example, you can get a support line as a DPS, or you could be a sorceress who's a hitmaster class and get a head attack line. It doesn't dilute the pool based off of what class you are. You're privy to all the lines. And that means that making a godly support bracelet is even harder than making a godly DPS bracelet, because there's only like 5 or 6 lines that are useful to you. Your main stats, which is 1 and 2, HP, which increases your heals and your shields, and then the 2 lines that either increase the crit rate of your party or increase the damage of your parties. It is hard to make a good support bracelet, which is again why people just settle. Yeah, you could absolutely do that. I actually do that. Yeah. So here's an example. Spec Swift is often a little bit cheaper, and the bracelet is just a little bit of extra stats. So, you know, if I wanted to, I could just do that. Now I have a little bit less crit, but that's okay because I'm a hallucination sorceress. And now I have 3% more attack speed and 3.7% more cooldown reduction, meaning my second Doomsday now has like a full 1 to 1.5 seconds of buffer where I don't have to cast it right away. It makes landing that second Doomsday on a repositioning enemy a lot easier, and I can just switch based off of what I'm fighting. My sincerest warning is do not wail for bracelets. There are so many better things that you can invest your gold into. The only people who should ever consider like wailing for bracelets is people who have literally done everything else. They've done everything else that they possibly can. The bracelet is the last stop. I would even go for a 9/7 stone before I wanted to wail for like a 15% bracelet. Most things that you spend your gold on, you get a tangible return for it. Like if you hone, you get a tangible return for it. Even if it's just Artisan's Energy, at least you're making progress towards getting stronger. If you buy gems, it's a tangible thing that you're guaranteed to get. Sometimes you can get fucked over on quality, but on average, eventually everyone gets the pretty good quality because the amount of Chaos Stones you get from content goes up over time. Right now, you guys get like 10 Chaos Stones a week. Later on, you can get like fucking 20 to 30 stones a week just from normal content. So if you feel like you're not getting a lot of Chaos Stones, the amount that you get per week goes up later on as more content unlocks. Bracelets are something that you can actually dump millions of gold in actual minutes and get literally nothing out of it. And so it is a very, very, very dangerous thing to whale in. You'd be left feeling very empty afterwards. Notably, who's one of the most prolific whales in Korea in general, calls bracelets the most pay-to-win system in Lost Ark, and even he shies away from it. So that should say a lot about the system. Everybody settles on the bracelet. You don't need an amazing bracelet to do content in the game. everybody settles on the bracelet. One of the reasons why bracelets are so expensive is because you just don't see a good bracelet that often, and so the amount that's on the market, there's just not that many. The reality of things about bracelets is, even if you had a literally infinite amount of gold, there are not enough bracelets on the market to supply what you would want to do. I shit you not, you know, just something to keep in mind. But yeah, that's the whole class on bracelets. Now you're more informed, now you're more educated on bracelets. Want this edited into a video? For fuck's sake, yes, sure. Z always pops up at just the right time.